the phrase of university honors. And I'll be delighted, especially in about a half an hour's time, to open it up to questions from you all. So please begin to give some thought to the questions that you'd like to ask these really distinguished panelists, one more of whom is going to join us, I'm sure. We saw her just a few minutes ago, so I know she's out there. She's just probably finding her way to this link. So she'll join us here shortly. Um, Maybe the place to start is to invite each of these folks to kind of briefly introduce themselves, tell us who you are when you graduated from Maryland, um, and briefly, because we'll sort of get into it, what you're doing now, these several years later. So, Monique, can we begin with you?
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me well? Can you hear me? I hope you guys are all having a great day. I am a 2017 graduate from the University Honors Program because I graduated initially with a BA in broadcast journalism. I then earned in 2018 my Bachelor's of Science in Atmospheric and Oceanic Science from that department at Maryland. I'm currently a professor at both Montclair State University, if anybody's familiar with Jersey, and then New Jersey City University. I'm also a doctorate student at Fairleigh Dickinson University. My background is in meteorology, so I did work previously in television, and then I made my transition as the professor. If you may find anything for me, if you Google both Monique Robinson and Monique Tawiah, my last name recently changed as once I got married to my husband, who's also a Maryland alum. So that's all for now. There's a lot to unpack there, but I got a lot of layers to me.
That's great. Thanks, Monique. I think Natalie's figuring out how to get her camera on. We're having a little technical difficulty with that, but I'm sure we'll resolve it here shortly. Sasha, can you give us an introduction?
Thank you, Dr. Blatti. So my name is Sasha Kahn. I was class of 2020 graduate of Maryland. I got degrees in government and politics, as well as in architecture, which I think you could see on the kind of the information screen at the front. After 4 years at Maryland, I went to Duke University School of Law, and I got my JD, which is a Juris Doctorate, which means I could be a lawyer. And in 2023, I graduated. I passed the bar exam in the state of Nevada, and then I clerked, which is where one works for a judge. I clerked for a year in Memphis, Tennessee, and now I'm spending a second year clerking with a federal judge here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And my hope long term is to be a federal public defender representing people on death row. So, that's me.
It's you in a nutshell. And whereas Monique recently married, you're about a year away, is my understanding from that.
Yeah, next November I'm getting married as well.
To you both. Great. All right, Natalie, you're up.
Well, on the topic of marriage, I also recently got engaged, so
Okay. Wow.
that's exciting. But yeah,
Congratulations.
so my name is Natalie. I graduated Maryland in 2014 and then did my PhD at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. Graduated earlier this year, and now I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard and Mass General Hospital in Boston. And I'm also a lecturer in the BME department at Johns Hopkins.
Great. So I am and I have to say this is I think as star-studded a group as we've assembled for one of these panels. So you all are really in for a treat. Um, I'm really curious about each of your respective paths, and I think since I started with Monique, I'm gonna go back to you, Monique. One of the things I noticed about your undergraduate experience is that, like Sasha, you were a dual degree student, and I believe the first student at Maryland to complete a BA, tell me if I've got this right, a BA in journalism and a BS in oceanic atmospheric sciences. So that is a rare combination. Uh, I imagine it wasn't what you foresaw for yourself, although maybe it was as a graduating high school senior. I'm wondering how you tell the story of finding your way to those two disciplines that presumably you didn't have much interaction with before coming to College Park.
Yeah, so I came to Maryland simply because I didn't want to go to Rutgers. I am 5, 10 minutes from Rutgers. Growing up, Rutgers is a phenomenal school. No shade to Rutgers, but I wanted to get the same feel. I love the camaraderie. I love the how everyone boldly wears their school pride everywhere you go. And so I wanted that same feel. I got that from Maryland. I wanted to be a journalist though. Had no interest in doing meteorology at all. I wanted to be a journalist. And my freshman year, I took a course where a professor basically told me like he saw no potential in me in being a journalist at Maryland. And so I was at a crossroads because, well, I came all the way here. I grew up in Jersey. I call myself a Jersey girl down now because elementary, middle school, high school, I lived in the same exact town. Kind of one of those things where you go to the grocery store, you know people, you go to church, you know people. Like I never had to make friends simply because I always just was around the same people my whole life. So when I went to Maryland, I struggled with making friends, adapting to the cultural changes, just being in a college environment. And then now I have a professor who tells me, you're not going to be good at this. So I'm like, do I leave? What do you do? And so I actually ended up sticking around, taking the gen ed course of weather and climate. I was like, I don't know, I may try this out. We'll see, maybe next semester it might improve, things might get better. And I fell in love with learning about the weather. And the professor at the time that I had, he was also could be my advisor. He's still there, Dr. Tim Canty, love him to death. And so he was like, well, I've never had a student want to do this before, but hey, let's, rock out. Let's figure it out together. And so that's kind of how my journey began into being that dual degree, being a pioneer in that way. There really was no guidance or framework. I really had to make it and make that, figure out, okay, how can I take certain classes and still meet the needs of other classes? In some ways, this was back when, I know I feel like an old lady. We used to have to carry our camera equipment and tripod. Now I imagine people use their phones and things when they're shooting stuff. But I used to go from like up the step hill carrying my camera because I had to shoot a recording of an interview, and I'd be like walking down to like the physics building down the step hill, carrying all my stuff. But like I felt finally like I was doing something that challenged me and I enjoyed. And so now it's funny, I teach weather and climate at Montclair. So that's kind of like a full circle moment. And funny enough, actually next semester I'll be teaching at Rutgers. So it's like all of life is just sending you back to where you were before. But that's kind of like the beginnings of my journey. There's more I can add, but I just leave it there.
So that's great. And I mean, it's further testament to one of the things I try to emphasize with students all the time about the importance of forging those relationships with faculty because they change your lives, right? So Natalie, I'm going to come to you next. If Monique went wide in journalism, atmospheric oceanic science, you went deep kind of from the start as a bioengineer and found your way, I think, pretty quickly, as far as I can tell, into research avenues. And I'm wondering how that started for you and how it sort of culminated for you in a way that led to the graduate program that you started at Hopkins.
Yeah, I didn't know much about bioengineering before I started at UMD. I'm the kind of person that really struggles to make decisions. And it was actually my sister who was like, I think you should do bioengineering. Like that would be good for you. And I did it. And I am super lucky that I loved the first thing I tried. So I was really happy where I was. I liked every aspect of it. Had a great first year, really enjoyed all my classes and my professors. And so I started applying for internships after my first summer or after my first year. So first summer after freshman year, and was lucky enough to get a internship at NIH.
Mhm.
And then after that, I really liked it. It was a wet lab internship. And so it was my first research experience. I really liked it. And I kind of made a plan from then to kind of structure my next opportunities throughout undergrad to kind of get an experience of the major sectors that bioengineering majors go to. So that would be government research, academic research, and also industry research. So after that NIH summer, I joined a lab on campus, Stephen Jay's lab, if anyone knows that, and worked there throughout the year. I took the next summer off to do an internship at AstraZeneca, a pharmaceutical company. Really loved that as well. I came back to Dr. Jay's lab and finished up in the BioE honors program. And after all those experiences and also TAing in undergrad, I tell everyone that I was super fortunate to always have great mentors and managers. So I actually loved everything I did. But I think one thing that stood out the most is that I really love teaching and mentoring. And I did love researching. So it was kind of a natural fit to want to stay on the academic path and become a professor, which means, teaching and leading a research lab. And so, that path is kind of naturally laid out. So after undergrad, I went to Hopkins for my PhD. And then after your PhD, if you want to lead your own lab, you really need to do another few years of training called a postdoc, which is what I'm doing now. And then in a few years, I'll be applying for faculty jobs.
Yeah. So that relationship with Dr. J, it sounds like, was really critical in maybe not just the lab work that you did there, but also in kind of shaping your understanding of the field. I mean, knowing that there are those various sectors that graduates move into. And I think one of the things that is trickiest for students is not so much succeeding once they're in the lab, but getting there in the first place. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you approached that kind of relationship? Was that was that a course that you took, and was it just a kind of cold call after class one day? Hey, I'm interested in your research, or how did that kind of unfold?
So I hadn't taken a class from him. He teaches upper level courses, and at the time that I was emailing, I was a freshman. So I hadn't met him yet, but I was on the UMD BioE faculty page and kind of scrolling through and looking at what research was out there. I didn't know much, but some of the descriptions caught my eye, and I think at the time I emailed maybe 2 to 3 professors at a time, which I think is a good way to go. Don't email all of them, but email like 2 and then see what you get back. But it was a cold email. And I think the biggest thing is that makes you stand out is just making the email incredibly specific. Don't email someone and say, hi, I want to do research. Is there an opening in your lab? That's awful. You should never be able to copy paste an email from one person to another. Never, ever. It should be very, very specific. So you email and say, dear professor, I saw that you do research in X and X. I read this recent paper that your lab put out. I'm really interested in this type of research because of blah, blah, blah. Can we set up a time to meet and talk about potential positions in your lab? Also attached is my resume. So that's kind of a general structure of how specific an email needs to be. And again, I just email a couple professors at a time. I was lucky that Dr. J reached back to me, and I had an interview with him and some people in his lab, and then I was able to join.
And there you were. That's great. Okay, Sasha, I'm coming for you next. So journalism, atmospheric oceanic science, that's plenty wide. Architecture, government and politics, law, that's another decidedly broad set of fields. So tell me how that constellation of interests kind of emerged, and particularly during your time as an undergraduate, and how law school made the most logical sense on the backside of that dual degree.
So it's funny, you were talking about how Monique's 2 majors she was the first person to ever put those 2 majors together. I think I was probably the first person at Maryland. I can't say that with certainty, but everyone gave me weird looks when I would say those 2. Right. So for me, I left high school thinking I either wanted to be a lawyer or an economist. And so I started majors in government and politics and economics. And for those of you all who were able to get through intermediate microeconomics unscathed. I applaud you. I was not. I left that class. I mean, I finished it, but I left that class and I was like, this economics is not for me at all. I can't do this. And so at that point, I had worked very hard toward my government major already, and I was most of the way there, but I was only 2 years into college. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be an economist, I guess I'll be a lawyer. Did a little research, what sort of majors, like what do you need to do as an undergraduate to be a lawyer? And for any of the, those of y'all who are interested in law, I hope you know that there is nothing specifically that you need to do. You just need to be an interesting person. And so I had long kind of joked, ha ha ha, what if I was an architect? What if I studied architecture instead? And I was like, you know what? With 2.5 years of college left, why don't I try it? And I was really, really fortunate at Maryland, specifically the architecture program there. And I believe there are a couple minors now. So if any of y'all are interested, I think you've still probably got time to fit enough classes in there. But what's really cool about Maryland's program is it can be history based if you want it to be. They teach a lot of architecture history classes. And for me, that was what I kind of fell in love with. I liked the design. I would, I had to take certain design classes in order to do the major. But for me, it was mostly American architecture, medieval architecture, Latin American architecture, modern architecture, several ancient architectures. All of these things were just a constant feed of interest for me. I really liked writing about it. I really liked reading about it. I really liked learning about it. I liked being able to walk around the campus and go, oh, that's a certain kind of plinth, or that's a Solomonic column, and things like that, and really annoying my friends a lot. But I realized in that I left college. I came into college thinking I either wanted to be a lawyer or an economist. I left college thinking, do I envision a career for myself in architecture history? And I had a number of long conversations, but figured in junior year that I was leaning more toward law, and I'm very happy I made that decision, but I wouldn't change the architecture passion for anything. I still read about architecture. I still like learning about it a lot. But for me, I really liked talking. I really liked arguing. I liked reading. I liked writing. And for those of y'all who are even thinking a little bit about law, reading and writing, you have to be willing to do it, and you really kind of got to like it, because almost everything you do as a lawyer is reading and writing. There isn't a ton of talking. There's plenty of that, but it's the reading and the writing.
So what I like about all three of your stories is that they illustrate, I think, how a kind of common theme for especially our most successful students who maybe come in with a kind of some preconceived notions about what they're going to do. And then there's often some sort of inflection point. It's a struggle in an econ course, or it's, a professor telling us something we don't want to hear, or there's something that happens that occasions a kind of moment of reflection and a kind of, emerging self-consciousness that's really forced on you about, okay, what do I really like? Do I really, Natalie, want to go into industry, or do I want to go into an academic path? And like, what's going to kind of be the inflection point that occasions that sort of dawning self-awareness? And it often also requires considerable courage to change course. And Monique, one of the things that I was interested in about your journey is how you sort of came to the realization you did at College Park, but you also have now transitioned from meteorology sort of to a much more academic path. You mentioned that you're in a PhD program now. You mentioned that you're teaching already. Tell me where the courage to make some of those hard decisions comes from. Is it relationships with other people? Are there kind of folks you go back to? Are there ideas, or I don't know, books you consult? Like where do you find the temerity to decide, I'm gonna shift somewhat abruptly at times from where it is I've been to where it is I now realize I'm trying to get to?
Yeah, so one thing that I really hold tight to now is like write your plans in pencil. A lot of us being in the honors program, just being very intellectual, we generally like things to be written out. We have a plan, we got to stick to the plan. We have, A, B, C, D, cross off the list. If it doesn't happen that way, oh my God, life is over. And I had to grow and realize I have time. And time is one of the greatest things that I have because I can try one thing today, I can try something else tomorrow, I can continuously try. That's all I really can do is try, because will I actually always perform with an A in life? No. And will I learn? Yes. Will I grow from it? Yes. And if I commit myself to the latter, I will continue to just be a better version of myself, which is all I ultimately can do. But I think one of the biggest reasons why my life has taken so many shifts is once I started to reframe my perspective, truly reframe my perspective away from self into how I can help others. When I was first leaving college and I wanted to be a meteorologist, I was really focused on getting a job for myself. Like I wanted to get a job, I needed to get a job. That was kind of like my focus after leaving. I was on television. Yes, I was helping people, but I was really still focused on self. Once I really started to engage in the news and I really started to see this issue with education, because I would spend a lot of times visiting schools. So I was on television, I did the news, but I also visited a lot of schools. And I noticed a strong disconnect with a lot of marginalized students not being as educated in STEM fields as other groups were. And so I started to grow a passion because I was seeing this disconnect. I worked in the South as well at the time. So I was in North Carolina. And I saw this strong disconnect where I would see Black students not performing well in STEM, not understanding STEM concepts. And it hurt me because I'm like, I'm promoting, yes, you can get here, but I'm actually not really helping you. I'm just saying it. And so I took a transition from being the person on television just showing you to now let me be the one on the more front line in the room with you as your professor. Let me be that person to kind of steer you in a better way, mentor you, help you in the ways that I can so that you can actually be better than me. Take myself out of it. And I think my faith, even being with my husband, because he is an attorney, he helped me have more of that analytical thinking of like, how can we reframe this a little bit? And so I think that has made all the difference. There's a lot of more layers to it, but I would say really just reframing how I see myself and what contribution I can make in this world reshaped everything that I do.
That's great. And I applaud that because I do think it takes a lot of courage to do that. I've got to ask you, so, and I will say for the benefit of the audience that if you haven't already, you really should visit these folks' LinkedIn pages. I'll be sure to mention before we wrap up tonight the UH LinkedIn page and invite you all to connect with one another and with us there. Um, Monique, I've got to ask you because I'm pretty confident that of all of us gathered, you're the only one who's given a TED Talk. So I want to hear how that happened. And we were chatting about it briefly before we jumped on here. Tell us about that talk and tell us about how you found your way to that opportunity.
Oh, I've always wanted to do a TED Talk. I used to, like, especially during COVID, I would post inspirational videos on my social media. I was really active and like really trying to be inspiring. And so they said that TED was coming to my town. I was living in Greensboro, North Carolina at the time. They said they were coming to the town. And I don't know, I just thought like, oh, if it's in this little town, like it's no big deal. It's just like in this town. I didn't realize like people from all over the country were applying to come here. I just submitted it. And my friend and she helped me edit the application. I just submitted it. And like they came back and they loved the idea. And I was like, oh snap. Like, okay, I guess I'm like really doing this. And it was really amazing opportunity just being at that center stage. I want to do another one, especially related to my research work. My research work is understanding the lived experience of Black students in meteorology programs. And so that's like one of my research focuses. But I really want to do another one. But my focus for that TED Talk was how to power through storms. And it was a metaphor for, I use weather as a metaphor. So like I used the 3 stages of a thunderstorm, and I talked about the 3 stages of life storms, how we can get through them and how we can get over them. And I used the weather as like a metaphor for that.
So I'm sure, and maybe Ms. Maldonado can help me out here. We can get that link in the chat so that folks can visit this and watch that because it's terrific. So Natalie, and forgive me, I'm focusing on changes and kind of inflection points. You work on things. I was reading about your research, and I have to ask you what organs on a chip, what organs on a chip technology is. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. But also, I'm just curious about research failures. Research is, I mean, it's experimental work. That work does not always succeed, and that I think, in my experience with researchers, that kind of instills a certain resilience, a certain kind of grit that can be useful in lots of different contexts of life. Tell us about a notable failure that you may have encountered. Tell us about a challenge that you've encountered in the research space and kind of how you approached overcoming that and what maybe significance it's had for the work moving forward.
Sure. And thank you, Magdalia, for putting that TED Talk in the chat. I have to do another thumbs up for that because I watched it and it's amazing. Anyway, yes. So it's hard to pick out just one failure because research is about 95% failures. I think the biggest thing to kind of mitigating that, and I will say it's hard, and it's probably hard for a lot of people on this call as well. If you're already in university honors, you're probably a go-getter, you're probably used to succeeding and getting things done, and then you go to a research environment and that's just not, you try your hardest and that doesn't mean it's going to work. So I think the biggest thing to like helping get over those hurdles is trying to find something good out of every experiment that fails. You learn something every single time. Just because you thought putting these certain things together was going to create a favorable outcome and then it didn't, and so instead of saying, oh, that didn't work, you now look at it as, okay, why didn't it work? What can I learn from that? How can I better design the next experiment to figure out either why it didn't work or to try to make it work better? And I think getting the engineering degree helped a lot with that, and just constantly thinking about, getting a product or the end of a research paper is not linear, it's a cycle. And just really committing to that kind of way of thinking has been super helpful. And yeah, I just, especially getting the PhD as well, I used to, take it really hard when I got experiments didn't go well, especially like my senior year of undergrad. I was trying a brand new project in the lab that hadn't been done before, and it was just failing. And I took it really personally, which is terrible because I was, doing the best. I was reading the research. I was doing everything I could. But sometimes it doesn't work out. And I noticed throughout my PhD, I got better and better at not bringing that home and not taking it personally and just seeing like, okay, well, that didn't work. On to the next. And let's see how we can keep moving it forward. Which has also helped in life a lot, I think, just that kind of mindset of, it's okay, it didn't work. I'll learn something from it and I'll move on.
Yeah. No, that's great. And you got to tell me, organs on a chip? I mean,
it means a lot of things. Some people are making organs on a chip because usually when we study organs, putting it in a petri dish, it doesn't always replicate the actual organ. And so we do a lot of animal studies, which is, of course, I mean, it's very expensive. There's a lot of ethical considerations with doing animal studies. So, one band of that organ on a chip research is trying to put together more, I guess, realistic in vitro models of these organs. So we can do things like study lots of different drugs on that organ on a chip before studying those lots of different drugs in animals. And then there's also kind of organ on a chip as the therapeutic itself. And so was my PhD work was kind of creating a lymph node mimic that can go inside the body for better activating your immune system for cancer. So there's kind of, different ways that you can go about it. But yeah, it's a really interesting field.
That's awesome. Okay, so I got one more question for Sasha, and then we're going to open it up to students. So please get your questions ready. Sasha, one of the things that I think really marked your time at Maryland was not just what you were doing in the classroom and not just the counsel you were providing me as we were rethinking university honors at the time, but also your involvement in a lot of other areas on the campus. You were advising the president on things. You were involved in the search committee for the next president. You were kind of all over the place in the university senate and the student senate. Student government. Tell me a little bit about how you like what sort of prompted that? Like what prompted that? What was the kind of inspiration for that sort of work? And how you went about kind of the building of the network that was necessary to kind of achieve those goals. I mean, you don't just walk up to main admin and knock on President Pine's door and say, "Okay, I'm here to bend your ear for an hour." That it's a process, and it's not really one that comes with a set of rules or guidelines. You have to kind of find your way. So how did you find your way to doing that kind of work?
Um, there's a long story and a short story. I'll stick to the short one. I was hit by a car in the parking lot at UMD. Not hard. I just finished a run. It was dark out, and car backed out to me, and I fell down. And it was the parking lot. I don't remember names. Lot A, maybe. It's the one next to the football practice field, like next to Cole Fieldhouse, the big one. And it was, as far as I know, still is the only way to get across campus on that side. Otherwise, you're going through Stamp or something like that. And when they were constructing Cole Fieldhouse, which they started before I stepped foot on campus in 2015, I think, and I think they just finished it recently, or maybe they're still working on it. Yeah. So I was hit by a car there because they had swallowed up the sidewalk to do the construction, and there was no other way to get across the campus. And I really, after that, I was like, I mean, I'd known it was an issue because, the only way to get across campus now, or one of the only ways, was to walk through a parking lot.
Yeah.
And so I came to a number of my friends and I said, discussed with them, what do we do about this? How do we make this change? And someone recommended that I go to the student government. I went to the student government, and no one was that interested in pushing a bill. So I ran for the student government, and I won, and I pushed that bill, and still there wasn't that much. Unfortunately, I noticed at the student government level, nothing really happened, at least at university policy wise. And so then I ran for the Senate, and that was I mean, I don't know exactly how much detail you need me to get into there. I was the guy, I'm sure the only one standing outside of different academic buildings, shaking people's hands, trying to get them to vote for me. And that's just kind of who I am. And from there, on the Senate, I ran for the Senate Executive Committee, where all the undergraduate senators select two to meet with to go to these meetings with administration once a month. And I was selected for that, and I did that for 2 years and kept pushing that policy. Was never fully successful, but did see certain changes come into place where they tried to be a little more, offer alternative accessible routes. That's what I called it, alternative accessible routes, AAR. whenever they were doing construction on campus. So I don't know what campus looks like right now. I know there's a lot of construction with Purple Line and all that.
Yeah.
I hope they're providing alternative routes. I definitely tried very hard to fight for that. But it all came because, you know, I went for a run one night and got hit by a car.
Right. Okay. So we don't recommend
No,
that.
please don't. Please don't.
But we do recommend the lemonade out of lemons sort of theme that I think you're hearing from all of our panelists. So I want to open things up now to students and invite you all to ask some questions of these folks. And I think Miss Maldonado is managing this for us. It looks like we've got some raised hands.
Yep, just feel free to use the Q&A box for any questions that you have.
Great.
I will ask some from the registration form that we asked.
Great.
What was the most valuable skill you learned at UMD?
All right, Natalie. I need a specific skill.
Yeah. I'm trying to think because the BME or BioEda program was wonderful. I loved it. It taught me so much. One specific skill, I don't know, I guess more the mindset that I can do it. They gave me a lot of resources to become more independent and to be able to step out into the world beyond undergrad and be successful. Maybe if you give me a few minutes, I'll have a better answer than that. But yeah, that's all I got for you now.
No, that's great. Monique or Sasha?
Not to be corny, but I think the fearlessness, like you really adapt it. Like you really get bold, you go after things. I really think that, I mean, if you want me to give you the nice answer, that's my nice answer. My other answer is to talk to me how to cook. Because when I lived on campus, when I became an RA and I lived off campus in courtyards, I had a kitchen. And so I really got to really practice cooking and things like that. My husband's grateful for it now. But back when I used to live there, my friends we would all put our monies together and like I could make a full tray of lasagna or I could make full trays of things. So it really taught me how to start cooking. And if there's anything you try to do in college, burn Maryland down first before you get to your apartment or your house. I encourage it, try it out. You never know. Eating out all the time is great, but learning those life skills right now is really essential because a lot of people don't get to learn them once you start getting older. So that's my other caveat. Fearlessness, yes. Cooking, another great skill.
Cooking, right. Okay. So a second bit of not officially UH sanctioned advice: burn down your residence hall. So I've had a couple of questions come in through the chat and through Q&A. So one that came to me through the chat, someone's asked, what are some classes you took that were actually practical in your current job? I think Sasha has already admitted that he's not drawing buildings in his current work as a clerk.
So I give a talk to the intro bioengineering class most semesters, Bio 121. And I think one of the things that I really try to push is that class skills are real skills, and try to, with every class you take, try to like figure out something that you can take with you into real life, because these are learned skills, especially like that Bio 121 class, for example. It's a lab class. And every single skill I learned in that class, I use to this day. So learning things like PCR or how to do mammalian cell culture, those are things you can put on your resume. I would say also with the caveat, if you put on your resume, you better be sure you know how to talk about it in an interview. Don't just put on your resume because you did it once. And then if they ask you, oh, you know how to do PCR, tell me about that, and you can't answer, that's going to be a problem. But these are real skills that you can put down, and giving talks, even if it's just in a class. Those are things you can put as well, especially when you don't have, other outside experience.
That's great. No, it's good advice about not registering as actual skills, things that aren't in fact skills. Sasha or Monique?
Yeah, I can oh gosh, I don't even remember what the class number was. It was called Courts Law and Justice, something like that. It was with Professor Spivey. I learned one of the things that he had us do, sometimes, not always, but if you were going to ask a question, you had to stand up, you had to say it out loud. And the other thing, he refused to accept anything like "I feel." And as an attorney, those are skills that are absolutely essential. You need to be able to get up and speak your, answer questions. He occasionally cold called. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of that, but that's where he would just kind of point at you and tell you to answer the question, which is something
I did
that
it to
happens.
Natalie just a minute ago, and of course she had to answer.
Which is something that happens all through law school. And so there were a lot of skills. I mean, for all of us up here on the panel, we've all done more school and we've all gotten more specific skills from other avenues. But I think it really set me up well. So I don't know if I necessarily can say like, I don't have anything like what Monique said about cooking, but like speak up.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily recommend jumping up on your feet and answering questions in class unless your professor asks for it. But
it's an interesting point, though, I think, Sasha, that in the learning of that skill, you also learned, I think, you also had some confirmation that maybe law
yeah,
was
for sure.
a path forward. Like if you had had a terrible experience in the acquisition of that skill, even if you had acquired it, you might have also acquired the self, awareness that maybe law wasn't for you if you hated it, right?
Absolutely.
The fact that presumably you didn't hate it was sort of confirmation of a direction you were headed.
It's true.
So there's a question in the Q&A, and I do see some hands raised. If you've got your hand raised, please do type the question in the Q&A. There's the question that I'm looking at asks, what do you wish you made time for during your time at UMD?
I'll say two things I always, when I look back, well, I tell this to my students now. The treatment you get from the world as a student and the treatment you get from the world as an adult are two completely different things. So while you are a student, the world is like, oh, student. When you become a real adult, it's, oh, you're just an adult. So what I mean by that is every time there's an opportunity that, is catered to students, take advantage of them. When I look back on college, I was very headstrong on sticking to the things that I know at first, rather than trying to explore a lot of what else was out there. Maryland has so many clubs, so many activities, so many things that you can engage into. And so I was a dancer growing up and I cheerleaded. So when I got to college, I was on dance team when I started. I didn't start exploring other things like boxing and other activities till the end. And I was like, dang, I wish I would have did that a little bit sooner. So I would say I would encourage you, really be open to what's all at Maryland, because you never know what interests you may have. And that actually could even spark a career path that could link to what you're currently doing that you may not be aware of. And then secondly, I would have definitely taken more advantage of study abroad opportunities, because that's something that I didn't explore while I was at Maryland.
That's great advice. You all may not know this, but we recently launched study abroad program within UH that sends students to Oxford. So we sent our first cohort last year, and second one headed this summer. Natalie?
I was just going to second what Monique said about taking time to do those like extracurricular activities, especially ones that aren't directly related to academics or your career path, because of course you can do all these things when you're an adult and outside of school, but they will never be at your fingertips like they are in college. So just take advantage of that, try different things, find a hobby that you can take with you after school.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. Sasha?
And two smaller things. one thing I wish I'd done a lot more of in college was reading just for fun. I feel like I kind of fell off a bit in terms of reading, and I kind of had to find that again. And law school didn't help because I was reading constantly, but also having that skill, being able to sit down and read would have been, I mean, I figured it out, but it would have been a little bit easier going into law school. And the other one is sleep. Please, like, I did not sleep enough in college. And I sincerely regret that because there will be fewer and further opportunities between to get good sleep than you have right now in college. So yeah, sleep.
So we've got a question. I mean, and I will second that for sure. Not that it's much, not that I do that much with a couple small kids these days, but we've got a question in the chat about your Vantage Point project, which none of these folks will have done because Vantage Point Seminar didn't exist even the short while ago that these folks were at the university. But the spirit of the question, I think, is what would you have done differently with a project that you invested time and energy into? And so I'm wondering, sort of more on this theme of lemonade out of lemons. Were there things that you invested a lot of time and effort into that, if you had it to do over again, you would have spent more time cooking or more time, I don't know, sort of navigating more successfully across campus than being hit by cars in lot one? I mean, what's something that you would have done differently if you could do it again?
I don't know because I feel like, I'm one of those people like if you change it, then who knows where I would be now,
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways I'm grateful for the times that I challenged the system at times because initially when I was in it, I felt like the world was against me. And a lot of times, sometimes when things don't go your way, and Natalie had mentioned sometimes when you're doing research work and the results don't come out in the moment, it feels like it's the worst thing ever when when you get a bad grade or when things don't go right. But over time, as you grow older and you look back, you're like, you know what? I see the lesson that I learned in that, and I'm grateful for that lesson because who would have known if I didn't have that experience happen, if I wouldn't have gotten hit. Sasha, your story was amazing. Although, that is something that's a tragedy. I mean, when you went on of all the things that you did and how you kept going and you kept fighting, I'm like, wow, like who would have thought someone who got hit in the parking lot would go on and beyond to do all that and now be an attorney, to have that knowledge and understanding, like it just sounds phenomenal. And similarly in my research work that I do now, I'm trying to understand how are certain students making it to where they're at because everyone has these unique paths of how we get there. And if we say, "Oh, I wish it didn't happen," who knows where we'd be?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the kind of the sort of growth mindset that informs that perspective, that it's not about getting the investment of time and energy right. It's, further to a point Natalie made a while ago, it's about making sure you take away from whatever emerges from that investment of time and energy. You take the lessons that will serve you well moving forward. So I've got another question, and keeping an eye on the time, this might be our last one, and I think probably all of you could give some thought to this one. So the question asks, what recommendations would you give to other students who are applying for internships or jobs post-grad to set their applications apart? So how did you, when you sort of pursued all of the avenues each of you did, and obviously had the success that you had in landing at Hopkins and sort of landing a job as a meteorologist initially and sort of landing at law school and the things that you've done subsequently. Um, do you look back and think, you know, this did it come out, say, in an interview that this thing that you said in a cover letter or this experience that you had or this way of approaching a certain kind of question made a difference, helped you stand out from the crowd and help you land the spot that you eventually landed?
So I'll double down on what I said earlier about every time you email someone, make it extremely specific. I also say this to people who are connecting with people on LinkedIn. I know you have to have premium to get unlimited messages to people, but I think you get like 5 free ones a month. So if you're going to connect with someone, it brings up this little box that says, do you want to add a note? Please add a note. That's going to increase your chances of actually connecting with them by a lot, because I get a lot of requests. And, you know, after tonight, I'll know that they're probably from this. But if I get one on a random weekday, and I don't have any mutuals, I probably won't respond unless there's a message that says, hey, I want to connect because of this. So please do that. And then one other thing I'll say, just probably the best advice I got for applying to jobs and grad schools. Those are very similar processes, is to study for that interview like you study for an exam. Pretend that you are about to take an oral exam and make sure you can answer every question. Know what the company does, know what you want to get out of this. Even if you don't have experience, say you're applying to an academic lab at Maryland and it's protein engineering and you've never done protein engineering, that's totally fine. But you need to know what protein engineering is. You need to know a little bit about what you're getting into. And you need to be able to, you know, speak to every single thing that's on your resume, and just really, again, study like it's an exam.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And that's not just advice, I think, for students. As somebody who hires faculty on a regular basis, you know, there are plenty of professionals, grown adults out there who haven't learned that lesson fully yet. Sasha or Monique, recommendations for job seeking, for internship seeking? Any last words?
So this is not going to sound like something particularly world breaking, but do something different. Not saying do a different job, but have something on your resume. Like, and you're asking what can you put on your resume to stand out? Something different. So for me, I had an architecture degree, which was different than anything that it's something that comes up in almost every interview I have. I was on the Alaska Law Review while in law school in North Carolina. That is something that I get lots of questions about. And I'm not saying just do these things because they look interesting on your resume, because I don't recommend that. Don't do things just to have them on your resume. But don't be afraid to do something, as Monique was saying, as Natalie was also saying, doing something a little bit outside of what you're comfortable with, outside of what you know. So for me, even if I didn't have the Alaska Law Review or architecture, I write music. That's something that I do for fun. And that's something that also sometimes gets questions as well. And it's a way that my resume stands out from someone who has an identical resume, better grades even potentially than me, and says, you know, they did mock trial in high school, and they did mock trial in college, and they did mock trial in law school, and that was all they did. Or alternatively, not doing anything at all. So you are an interesting person. The person you are is the only person out there like that. Branch out a little. Don't be afraid to put certain things on your resume. It's okay. You know, if you are very, very into video games and that is a passion of yours, it's okay to say that on your resume. Some people might raise an eyebrow, but other people might really like that. You never know. So it's really important to put your personality into your application, because
And I just say on that, they're not just interviewing someone that can do the job, they're interviewing someone that might be their coworker. So be someone that they want to be coworkers with.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's great. And it humanizes you for sure. And as you say, Natalie, I mean, people work and interact with humans, not with resumes. So yeah. Monique, any parting counsel for us?
Yeah, so I've never applied to any job I ever had. I actually am that, I said we're fearless, right? As Terps. I literally find that person who's in charge and I email that person directly and I say, hey, I'm Monique. I tell them who I am. I give them my background. I say, are you available for a conversation? And from then, if they respond, they respond. If they don't, they don't. But I'm like, I want it. I'm going for it. I'm going after it. A lot of people think I'm crazy, including my mom. But it's worked every time for me in the places where I needed to be. And so I'm very big on, if that's what you want, go for it, because no one's coming and knocking on your door. They're the ones looking for the job. They don't know you exist. You're going to be in a pile anyway. Might as well shoot your shot. And like I said, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But like Natalie was saying about your email, you want to be very specific. And I was going to add previously with about the things I've learned. Spell things correctly. In journalism, we used to, it was like this rule. I don't know if they still do this, but like if you spelled the person's name wrong, you immediately get an F on your work. And so I'm very big. I'm very big on making sure I spell things correctly, making sure I reference things properly, making sure my sentence structure is good. I know it may sound silly, duh, we're in college, but when you're sending these emails, you don't want to send some whack email and then the person's like, they can't even spell. Why would I want to, talk to them? So you want to come correct when you do it. Additionally, don't always seek out people when you're looking for something from them. Sometimes what I encourage my students now, if you see someone in a position you may want, maybe just reach out to them and just talk to them, have a conversation with them, and then continuously follow up in the future, check-ins, that type of thing. A lot of times I speak at a lot of different Zooms, I go in schools and people say, oh yeah, I'm gonna add you on LinkedIn. And I never hear from the student, never anything. You're just a person that follows me. And I don't even know who you are. And there could be many ways that I can help you. There can be ways that you can help me, but we have no clue because we're not in conversation. So a couple things that I added there, but just spicing up some of the stuff that was already mentioned.
And just to piggyback off Monique for a sec, seriously, your resume, no mistakes, and make it as easy as possible to read. And if you're applying with things like your unofficial transcript or something, you don't need to use the one that UMD gives you. You can make your own. Now, they can check it, don't lie on it, but you can make your own that is easy to read. You can find examples online. Make your application as easy to read and as easy to understand as absolutely possible. And seriously, cover letter, resume, any spelling mistakes, any grammar mistakes, people don't like that. People don't like it.
Words to live by. We've had a lot of discussion of LinkedIn tonight, and I want to make a point to drop into the chat here the UH LinkedIn page. I think we've heard from Natalie that you better have a message to accompany a request to connect with any of these distinguished folks. You don't need a message to connect with us on UH. You should be connecting with us on that page. You're a member of this community. You're a member of, I hope you've seen tonight, a wider community of students who have come before you. And we certainly encourage you to maintain those connections and to take advantage of them. These are three folks who have taken time out of their day to offer counsel and advice, and I'm sure within reason they would be happy to continue to do so for those who have come behind them to UH through UH. So I want to I know we're a couple minutes over, but I want to thank all three of you for joining us. These conversations are always fun. This one was especially a delight. So thank you for making time to give back. It's an important part of academic university citizenship, and so we're grateful to you for making some time for the folks who are here. I want to say a special shout out to Miss Maldonado, who's been under the weather and managed to persevere through this evening. So thanks to Migdalia for keeping us on track. And yeah, have a good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Stay in touch. They all left. I usually turn off my camera to